Chosen one. They didn't reject you because you were wrong. They rejected you because you were ahead of them. You saw something they weren't ready to see. You spoke a truth their illusions couldn't bear to hear. You carried a vision too heavy for shallow minds and too piercing for those still hiding from their own reflection. Let's be clear, what happened to you wasn't abandonment. It was spiritual exile. Not because you were broken, but because your spirit refused to be broken. You weren't removed for weakness. You were removed because your very presence was a threat to everything built on pretense, on fear, on lies dressed up as tradition and limitation, parading as humility. You didn't choose this path to stir trouble. You were chosen to carry a fire that makes comfort zones uncomfortable. And that fire, it came in the form of vision, divine insight, clarity that doesn't just reveal but confronts. And when you walk into a room carrying that kind of energy, something always gets exposed. Something always shakes. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how people react strangely when you simply speak what's obvious to your spirit? How they shift, pull back, or attack not because of what you said, but because you said it. Let's talk about why that happens. Before we dive deep into this message, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Because this isn't just content. It's a divine confirmation for the chosen ones who were exiled for their vision, yet ended up awakening something far greater. What you carried, what you still carry, is disruptive. But it's holy. It's not chaos. It's correction. And when you showed up with that level of awareness, they didn't just misunderstand you. They feared you. Because in you, they saw what they tried to bury. In you, they saw the version of themselves they were too afraid to become. You carried dreams they called delusions, ideas they labeled arrogance. You spoke of future moves while they were still rehearsing old scripts. And the more aligned you became, the more uncomfortable they felt. It started subtly. A conversation here, a strange silence there. You began to notice people flinch when you shared your insights. Not because you were harsh, but because the truth makes the comfortable feel unsafe. And the more you honored your vision, the more it became clear you were no longer one of them. Some of you were exiled from families, some from churches, some from communities, even from your inner circles. All because your growth made stagnation intolerable. Your clarity made confusion unbearable. Your elevation made jealousy rise like steam. And so they whispered. Then they shouted. Then they shut the door. But listen, God never lets a chosen one walk through exile without purpose. There's always a reason, always a refinement, always a redirection. And in your case, what looked like a setback was really a sacred setup. Let me tell you something that most people never realize until it's too late. Exile is one of heaven's favorite tools. When God marks you for something bigger, He often allows you to be removed before you can be revealed. Because where you came from would have tried to define you too small, too soon. They would have called you one thing and refused to let you grow beyond that. But your purpose couldn't afford to be boxed in, so the exile wasn't random. It was ordained. What you saw, the vision that stirred so much rejection, wasn't just imagination. It was revelation. You weren't dreaming too big. You were decoding divine blueprints. And the reason they couldn't see it is because it wasn't given to them. It was given to you. But here's the part that hits deep, even though they exiled you. Your awakening stayed with them. That spark you carried, it didn't die when they pushed you out. It lingered. It lit a match in someone who was watching silently. It stirred a question in someone who doubted you out loud. It made others wonder, what if they were right after all? Your exile didn't end your influence. It multiplied it. Think about it. When the prophets of old were cast out, what happened? Their words didn't vanish. Their presence wasn't erased. Instead, what they carried became a catalyst, a fire that started spreading long after they were gone. You, chosen one, are no different. You see, they wanted to silence your message. But what they didn't realize is that divine messages echo louder in silence. They hoped you'd disappear. But when a chosen one is removed, heaven amplifies the message. Because the rejection of man is often the microphone of God. Every time you were told you're too much, what they really meant was, I'm not ready. When they said, you've changed, what they meant was, I haven't moved. And when they said, you need to be realistic, what they really feared was that your reality might expose their limitations. Your vision became a mirror they didn't want to look into. And when people can't handle their own reflection, they break the mirror. They exile the visionary. But you didn't die in that exile, did you? No. You grew. You awakened. You got clearer. And though it hurt, though the silence felt like punishment, you started to realize this separation was spiritual surgery. You were being cut away from the places that couldn't carry your destiny. And now your light is undeniable. Even from a distance, they feel it. Even when they act like they've forgotten you. They remember. Because you planted something in their spirit that refuses to die. They exiled you. But the vision you carried leaked into the cracks of the community. And now they don't know why their spirit is restless. Why certain people are questioning old narratives. Why some can't settle for empty rituals anymore. It's because of you. Your obedience caused a spiritual disturbance. Your exit created an awakening. Your exile became evidence. And though they may never say it, some of them are watching. Secretly. Silently. Waiting to see if what you spoke ever manifests. And it will. Because heaven never wastes revelation. And the seed you carried wasn't for you alone, it was for generations. Chosen one. This is your confirmation you were exiled because of your vision. But that same vision set fire to the atmosphere. You left with wounds, but they stayed with questions. And now, the very fire they tried to extinguish is catching in places you never imagined. So walk tall. You are not forgotten. You are not mistaken. You are not cursed. You are called, and every exile in your life has only proven this one sacred truth. The vision was never theirs to validate. It was yours to carry, to birth, and to become. Chosen one. Let's go deeper. You may have spent years thinking, what did I do wrong? Replaying conversations, rehearsing your tone, wondering if you should have said less, smiled more, dimmed your light just a little so they'd be more comfortable. But let me free you with this truth. Their discomfort was never about you. It was about what your presence stirred in them. When you walk in spiritual authority, even if you're still learning what that authority means, you carry a frequency that exposes. Your energy becomes a revealer. Your very existence starts pressing against the false identities others have carefully constructed. And the thing about false selves is, they're fragile. They crack under truth. They crumble under presence. And you, chosen one, you are presence. You walk into a room and the atmosphere shifts. You speak, and silence feels different. You dream, and suddenly people feel small, not because you made them feel that way, but because your vision reminded them of what they've ignored in themselves. You didn't hurt them. Their own denial did. You didn't attack their beliefs. Your clarity just made them question what they've always blindly accepted. And instead of growing, they got angry. Instead of inquiring, they got defensive. Instead of honoring your authenticity, they branded it as arrogance. The fear in their eyes, that wasn't fear of you. That was fear through you. It was fear of what you made them feel. Because when a chosen one rises, dormant spirits begin to stir. When someone walks in divine assignment, anyone not walking in theirs starts to feel exposed. And that exposure, it rattles them. They may say you're too intense, but what they mean is your truth makes their excuses loud. They may say, you think you're better, but what they mean is your confidence reminds them of the self-worth they never claimed. You see, the world has been trained to fear what's unfamiliar, to push away what doesn't mirror its own insecurities. So when you showed up with that divine awareness in your eyes, when you began speaking in terms of healing, awakening, alignment, they couldn't handle it. Why? Because you broke the unspoken agreement. The one that says, let's all pretend we're fine. The one that says, let's not talk about the spiritual stuff. It's too much. The one that says, don't go deeper. It'll make people uncomfortable, but you couldn't pretend anymore. Your awakening didn't give you the option to be small. It pulled you into truth. And that truth radiated off you like light through stained glass. It was beautiful. It was disruptive. It was divine. But to those still hiding in shadows, it felt like interrogation. That's why they exiled you. They couldn't name the shift you carried, so they labeled it dangerous. They couldn't categorize your clarity, so they called it confusion. They couldn't match your frequency, so they decided it must be flawed. But chosen ones know better. And now, so do you, because you're starting to see the pattern. The closer you got to truth, the more rejection came. The clearer your boundaries got, the more attacks showed up. The more silent you became listening to the spirit rather than the noise, the more offended they became. Why? Because you stopped playing the role, and that role was never yours to begin with. You were never meant to be the peacemaker at your own expense, never meant to nod and smile while your soul was screaming, never meant to shrink so someone else could feel tall next to you. You were meant to disrupt, meant to shift, meant to see. That's what scared them. Not your words, not your silence, your vision, your knowing, your refusal to live like the spiritually asleep. And yet, you tried to make it work. You tried to go back, to blend, to water down your message just enough so maybe they'd let you stay. But the spirit in you kept rising. The code in your soul kept unlocking. And every time you dulled your shine, it physically hurt. That ache you felt, that wasn't rejection. That was misalignment. The Holy Spirit will make you feel homesick in the wrong place. And if you're not careful, you'll interpret it as loneliness. But it's not. It's divine discontent. It's the soul saying, we can't keep living this lie. And they felt it too. That's why the exile happened faster than you expected. That's why people started treating you like a stranger, even while claiming to love you. That's why friends turned cold, mentors turned distant, and groups you once fit into began to feel suffocating. They saw the shift before you fully owned it. And in spiritual terms, that's normal. Because darkness always recognizes the approach of light, even if the light doesn't yet realize how bright it's become. Let that sink in. They saw your awakening before you did. They sensed your frequency rising before you understood what was happening. And instead of celebrating it, they panicked. Because your growth made their stagnation obvious. Your calling highlighted their complacency. And some of them had positions, titles, influence, yet no true authority. And your presence threatened their platforms. Not because you were trying to take anything, but because your anointing revealed how much they were faking. They felt exposed, so they labeled you rebellious, unstable, overly spiritual, even dangerous. But it wasn't you they feared, it was what your life revealed about them. This is how the chosen are often treated. But don't let that make you bitter. You weren't born to be understood by everyone. You were born to awaken those who are ready and challenge those who aren't. It's lonely, but it's purposeful. Because here's what's happening in the background. Chosen one, while they talk, while they scoff, while they pretend you don't matter, others are watching. Quietly, carefully. And your exile is speaking louder than any sermon they've ever heard. Your exit said more than your presence ever could. You taught them what divine boundaries look like. You modeled what it means to walk away without drama, to choose peace over performance, to trust God over groupthink. And now seeds are growing. That's what they don't understand. That you can remove the messenger, but you can't unhear the message. You can exile the prophet, but you can't silence the prophecy. So let them mislabel you. Let them dismiss you. Let them call you crazy, intense, difficult, too spiritual. Because one day when they're ready, they'll remember your words, your energy, your presence. And they'll realize you weren't trying to destroy anything. You were trying to wake it up. Chosen one. The fear they projected was never yours to carry. Return it, release it. Refuse to shrink for those who never had the capacity to hold your calling. You are not intimidating. You are anointed. You are not the problem. You are the prophecy, and you are not too much. You are just enough to break chains, ignite fires, and rewire frequencies. Not everyone will get it, but the right ones will. And those who were meant to hear your vision, they will rise. Because the exile didn't end your purpose. It only cleared the path for those who truly have ears to hear. Chosen one. Let's talk about what they couldn't articulate, but what their spirit felt every time you entered the room. It wasn't your voice, your clothes, your smile, or even your message that unsettled them the most. It was your frequency. The energy you carry is not ordinary. It's divine, calibrated through pain, purification, and prophetic timing. You don't just speak truth, you emit it. You don't just have presence, you are presence. And that presence carries a spiritual frequency that disrupts what is false, stagnant, or secretly crumbling. Every illusion they built about who they are, about what they believe, about what power looks like started to shake the moment your vibration entered the space. Why? Because truth has a sound, and light has a frequency. And when the anointed walk into a room, the unseen realm pays attention, whether people consciously understand it or not. Their spirit does. Your frequency carries revelation, and revelation exposes what has been hidden. Some of them were comfortable behind masks they wore for decades until you walked in with unfiltered authenticity. You weren't trying to call people out. You were simply being real. But your realness disrupted their entire performance. Your clarity exposed their confusion. Your stillness revealed their chaos. That's why they accused you of being too deep, too serious, too intense. Not because you are those things, but because you refuse to play along. You wouldn't lower your vibration to match their drama. You wouldn't pretend just to belong. You chose alignment over acceptance. And that choice, that shattered the false foundations. Let's be honest. Some of these people weren't just uncomfortable with you. They were convicted by you. Because everything about you screamed, there's more. And for people who've built entire lives around mediocrity, more sounds like a threat. Not because of what it demands of you, but because of what it exposes in them. You didn't say they were fake, but they felt seen. You didn't call them weak, but they felt small. You didn't attack them, but they felt pierced. Why? Because spiritual frequency bypasses ego. It goes straight to the soul. It speaks a language deeper than intellect. And when you've been hiding from your soul for years, that language feels like an earthquake. And here's the thing, you weren't even at full power most of the time. You were trying to hold back. You were second-guessing yourself, trying not to come off too strong, attempting to ease into conversations that your spirit wanted to flip upside down. But even on your quietest day, your energy spoke volumes, because chosen ones don't need a platform to shift the room. They are the platform. They are the spiritual infrastructure for healing, awakening, and divine disruption. And when that frequency shows up, everything not rooted in truth starts trembling. That's what you saw. The trembling, the eyes that looked away, the fake smiles, the passive-aggressive comments, the abrupt exits, the dismissive tones. You thought you were imagining it, but your spirit was picking up on the friction. That was spiritual resistance, not personality conflict. That was energy pushing against energy. And when frequencies clash, something always breaks. Chosen one. Hear me clearly, it wasn't that they hated you. It's that they couldn't keep lying to themselves in your presence. Your alignment became an alarm clock they didn't want to hear. Your elevation started to confront their stagnation. And instead of ascending with you, they exiled you. Because the alternative would have been to evolve, and not everyone is willing to pay the price for that. You were. That's why your frequency increased. That's why your dreams intensified. That's why your discernment got sharper. That's why even your silence became prophetic. You were being spiritually upgraded. While they were trying to maintain appearances, you were breaking through illusions. And when you break through illusions, you stop speaking surface language. You start speaking spirit to spirit. That's what began to happen. You'd say things you didn't fully understand at the time. You'd get gut feelings about people, places, or choices, and later find out you were right. You'd be pulled away from events, relationships, even whole environments, and couldn't explain why. But your spirit knew, because when your frequency rises, your spiritual sensitivity multiplies, and you begin to live by vibration, not validation. And those who depend on external validation, who build their worth on applause, attention, or agreement, will resent your freedom. Because you're no longer manipulated by their approval. You're moved by truth, and truth has no agenda but alignment. Let me pause and tell you this. Your energy is sacred. Don't waste it explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Don't lower it to entertain chaos. Don't distort it to fit into a space God already told you to leave. You don't owe anyone access to your energy, especially not those who tried to weaponize your presence against you, especially not those who mock what they don't understand. especially not those who tolerate you, but never honor you. You are a walking shift, and that kind of presence doesn't belong everywhere. So yes, your frequency may have shattered some old foundations. Good. They needed to fall. Because truth is never cruel, but it is confrontational. And the life God is building through you requires strong foundations, ones that can handle your clarity, your calling, and your divine weight. And let me tell you, your weight is increasing. Spiritually, energetically, prophetically, you are being upgraded because your assignment is expanding. And the reason certain rooms no longer feel right, the reason you feel so much friction in places that once embraced you, is because your frequency has evolved. You've changed, and they haven't, and that's okay. You are not responsible for how your transformation makes others feel. You are not required to apologize for the clarity you carry. You are not obligated to dim just so people who refuse to grow won't feel exposed. You are responsible for obedience. That's it. Obedience to what the Spirit is doing in you. Obedience to the truth rising in your chest. Obedience to the frequency that refuses to be silenced. Because the more you obey, the louder your light becomes. And that light, it's exposing strongholds. It's waking up sleeping souls. It's collapsing false authority structures. It's setting atmospheres on fire just by being there. So when they look at you sideways, when they back away, when they whisper or scoff or go silent, remember this. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the assignment inside you. They're not offended by your personality. They're offended by your presence, because presence breaks chains. Presence rewrites atmospheres. Presence carries heavenly voltage, and that's what you've been wired with. You didn't ask for it. You didn't chase it. It was placed inside you. And now, it's starting to radiate in full. Chosen one. The trembling you cause is confirmation, not of your harshness, but of your holiness, not of your error, but of your elevation. You are not meant to fit. You are meant to shift. So keep rising. Keep radiating. Keep carrying the frequency that shakes the foundations of every lie. Because one day, even those who exiled you will feel the warmth of the fire you started, and they'll realize you weren't there to destroy, you were there to awaken. Chosen one. Now we arrive at the part most won't talk about. You didn't awaken by accident. And you didn't just go through a personal shift, you went through a divine ignition. Something set ablaze in your soul, and that fire, it couldn't be tamed. It didn't politely ask permission. It roared through every layer of illusion, through every performance you'd been forced to live, and burned down what was never yours to carry. Your awakening wasn't just your liberation, it was their disruption. Because let's tell the truth, you were the first flame. But you weren't the last. The moment you woke up, really woke up, of the people around you began to feel something stir. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't immediate. But something inside them shifted. A dormant longing. A forgotten question. A crack in the wall they built to keep truth out. And that's what they couldn't forgive. It wasn't that you left them. It's that you changed them without trying to. Just by being you see. Chosen one. Awakening is contagious. It's a spiritual wildfire. One soul on fire can light an entire region if the atmosphere is dry enough. And let me tell you, this world, it's been dry. Dehydrated from truth, starving for purpose, cracked open from years of pretending. And you were the match. The spark, the catalyst that made people confront things they'd buried deep. Trauma. Purpose, identity, truth, spirit. All the things they were taught to suppress suddenly became impossible to ignore once they witnessed your transformation. You may not have even said a word, but your life started preaching, your silence screamed, your choices challenged, your energy convicted, your boundaries taught. And every time they watched you walk differently, speak differently, show up differently, it called something out of them they weren't ready to face. That's what fire does. It doesn't ask politely. It consumes, it spreads, it transforms whatever it touches. And once your awakening ignited, there was no putting it back in the box. You couldn't unsee what you saw. You couldn't unknow what spirit revealed. You couldn't go back to pretending that everything was fine when your soul knew better. And when you stopped playing along, the whole system started to shake. Relationships, communities, spiritual circles, even your workplace. All of it. Because the structure was built on silence. And you found your voice. The agreement was built on pretending. And you chose truth. The culture was built on fear. And you moved in faith. And when one person chooses alignment over acceptance, everyone around them is forced to decide evolve or exile. Most chose exile. Not because they hated you, but because your transformation made them accountable to theirs. And that's heavy. That's why it hurts so deeply. Not just the exile, but the weight of knowing. The ache of seeing how stuck they are. The grief of realizing how much fear they still carry. Because once you awaken, you don't just feel your pain anymore. You start feeling the collective pain, the cultural wounds, the generational silence, the deep, aching soul cries of those who still sleep. You became a mirror, and no one warned you how hard it would be to carry that reflection, but you did it anyway. You didn't shrink. You didn't retreat. You didn't sell out. You burned, and because you burned, they had to choose either embrace the fire or try to extinguish it. Most tried to extinguish it. With mockery, with distance, with rumors, with silence. But fire doesn't die that easy. Not when it's divine. Not when it's your assignment. Because you weren't just ignited for you. You were ignited through you. Spirit lit your soul on fire because there were others waiting for warmth. Others trapped in the cold cages of religion, people-pleasing, trauma, and cycles they couldn't break. And now your awakening is beginning to catch. The one who quietly watched you leave is now asking questions. The one who laughed the loudest is now wrestling with restlessness. The one who said, "You're crazy," is now craving what you carry. Because the fire they tried to smother has caught wind. You didn't just light a match, you shifted the climate. And in spiritual terms, that's exactly what chosen ones are anointed to do. Not everyone is called to be liked. Some are called to be lit. You are one of them. Because transformation has a cost. It always does. And that cost often comes before the fruit is visible. Before people thank you. Before they admit what you did for them. But chosen ones don't move for applause. They move for assignment. And your assignment was never about being accepted. It was about being activated. You are a spiritual activator. The way you walk, speak, and refuse to conform has now become a blueprint for others. And whether they admit it or not, your life is shaping theirs. Let them deny it. It doesn't stop the impact. Truth doesn't need approval to remain true. Your awakening has started chain reactions. People you don't even know are whispering your name, wondering how you broke free, asking themselves if maybe, just maybe, they could too. That's why you were exiled, not because you were wrong, but because you were early. And pioneers are always punished before they're honored. You broke the mold. You walked away before it was trendy. You chose healing over fitting in. And now, the ripple effect is undeniable. Yes, you were the first to burn. But you will not be the last. And if it feels like pressure, that's because it is. Spiritual fire is not gentle. It demands everything. It burns away ego, comfort, performance, and pretension. It leaves only what's real. And that's what you're becoming, real in a world addicted to fake. That's why they stare. That's why they study you, even from a distance. That's why they still bring up your name, long after you've gone silent. Because the blaze you lit in your own soul started to melt the ice in theirs. They'll never forget you, not because you were dramatic, but because you were divine. You carried the flame. You sparked the shift. You set the community ablaze, not in destruction, but in awakening. And that chosen one is your confirmation. You weren't too much. You were the start. You weren't exiled in punishment. You were lit in purpose. And the fire you carry, it's just getting started. Chosen one. They thought the exile would break you. They thought pushing you out, shutting you down, silencing your voice would strip you of power. But what they didn't understand is that exile is not the end. It's a portal, a holy, spiritual threshold that separates those walking in purpose from those still performing for acceptance. You were never meant to stay in the place that cast you out. You were meant to go through it. Because exile, though painful, is often the very furnace that forges your authority. It's where your spirit matures, your discernment sharpens, and your divine assignment becomes undeniable. The moment they turned on you, something else turned in you. What felt like betrayal was actually a baptism. What looked like rejection was a redirection. Because God will allow people to close doors so that you stop asking to stay in rooms He never called you to. And I need you to hear, this loud and clear: exile is not punishment. It's positioning. Because, let's tell the truth, you were becoming too dependent on people who could never carry your calling. You were placing sacred vision in hands that couldn't even carry their own reflection. And though you tried, God knows you tried, you couldn't ignore the ache that kept growing. That holy discontent. That soul-deep whisper that said, "This place is too small for what I'm doing in you." But you didn't want to leave. Did you? You loved them. You wanted to grow with them. You prayed for unity, for harmony, for mutual elevation. You didn't want to abandon anyone. Your heart was loyal, even when their treatment wasn't. You kept showing up, kept giving, kept forgiving, even while your spirit was slowly suffocating, until exile made the decision for you, and it hurt. God, it hurt. The silence, the withdrawal, the lies, the way they turned others against you, the way they made you look like you were the problem when all you did was grow. All you did was obey the voice of Spirit. All you did was honor your awakening. But here's the sacred mystery: exile was the exact spiritual condition you needed in order to step into the next version of yourself. Because in exile, you stopped performing. In exile, you stopped editing your truth to keep the peace. In exile, you remembered who you were before the world taught you to fear your own voice. And most importantly, in exile, you started hearing God more clearly. That wilderness became your sanctuary. You learned to walk alone, to pray with power, to discern what was divine and what was just distraction. You grew a backbone in that isolation. You found your roar. You found your rhythm. You learned how to be whole without their applause, their presence, or their permission. You built you, and now you're standing on spiritual ground you couldn't have accessed without being shut out first. Because some elevations require disconnection. Some clarity only comes after the crowd is gone. And sometimes God has to strip the noise just to amplify His voice. The exile purified you. It stripped away the need to be liked. It removed the idols of affirmation and belonging. It exposed the parts of you still addicted to human validation. And in its place, it planted something eternal, divine confidence. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that doesn't flinch when misunderstood. The kind that walks boldly in rooms where your name has been slandered, knowing that your light speaks louder than their lies. And now, the places that rejected you, they're feeling your absence. Because when you left, the fire went with you. The atmosphere shifted. The dynamic changed. The authenticity disappeared. Because you weren't just in the group, you were the pulse. And they know it now. They feel the void. The very energy they pushed out is now the energy they lack. Because the anointing doesn't beg to stay. It moves where it's honored. And you, chosen one, were never meant to be tolerated. You were meant to transform. So take a deep breath and let go of the guilt. Let go of the wondering. Let go of the urge to apologize for growing. Let go of the false idea that you could have fixed it. Had you just played smaller? No. Beloved, that place couldn't contain you. Not because you were arrogant, but because your vision had outgrown their capacity. And when vision outgrows environment, exile is inevitable. But here's the beauty: they couldn't kill what God called. They couldn't mute what heaven marked. And they couldn't stop what was never theirs to begin with. So while they were busy closing doors, you were being invited into dimensions. While they gossiped, you were being groomed. While they conspired, God was consecrating you. And every tear you cried during that painful season, it watered the ground for your next. Because exile always precedes elevation. Look through Scripture. Joseph was exiled by his brothers before he ruled in Egypt. David was hunted down and driven out before he wore the crown. Jesus himself was rejected by his hometown and crucified by the crowd before the resurrection that changed everything. You are not alone in this. You are in divine company. And just like them, your story doesn't end with exile. It begins there. Because now that you've been refined in the fire, now that you've learned who you are without their validation, now that you've stopped second-guessing your gift, you're unstoppable. You're not just carrying a message anymore. You are the message. Your walk is prophecy. Your voice is healing. Your life is light. And the ones who exiled you, they will have to watch what heaven does next. Not as a punishment, but as a witness. Because God loves them too. And one day, your story will be the very key that unlocks theirs. So stand tall, chosen one. You didn't just survive the exile. You were transformed by it. And now you're walking through the portal with authority, with clarity, with fire in your eyes and peace in your soul. Because this isn't just your comeback. This is your becoming. Chosen one. Let's strip back the layers and name the truth that's been stirring in your soul. You weren't just exiled, you were sent. Yes, it felt like rejection. Yes, it came with pain. But if you look closely spiritually, you'll start to see that behind every shut door, every betrayed friendship, every cold shoulder, was a divine orchestration guiding you toward your real assignment. Because you were never made to blend in. You were made to break through. You weren't created to keep the system intact. You were born to expose it. And your presence alone, your energy, your discernment, your spiritual DNA, it carries the blueprint of something new, something disruptive, something holy. And anything built on fear, control, or illusion feels that vibration long before it can name it. You were never misunderstood. You were misidentified. They thought you were rebellious when you were actually righteous. They called you difficult, when really, you were discerning. They labeled you disloyal. But in truth, you were deeply aligned. Because when you start walking in divine clarity, the systems that benefit from confusion will always label you the enemy. But let me be even more clear. You are not the enemy. You are the assignment. You were sent into that family, that ministry, that circle, that community on purpose, to be a living reminder that spiritual sleep is not safety, to be a walking disruption to complacency, to be a divine interrupter of generational patterns, to be the echo of a voice that calls people out of the caves they've settled into. You weren't called to coddle dysfunction. You were called to confront it, not with violence, but with vibrational truth, not with arrogance, but with spiritual authority. And that authority, it speaks without shouting. It shakes without effort. And that's what they couldn't handle. Because while they were memorizing rituals, you were embodying revelation. While they were repeating doctrine, you were channeling downloads. While they were building altars to conformity, you were setting fire to everything that didn't feel like God. You were the shake they didn't see coming, the movement they couldn't manage, the frequency they couldn't contain, and what they couldn't control, they tried to cast out. But they missed something crucial. You're not just a vessel, you're a weapon, not in the carnal sense, but in the spiritual. You've been forged through warfare, refined by rejection, sharpened in the wilderness. And now you move with the awareness of someone who knows they were sent. You carry that stillness, that conviction, that quiet power. Because when you know you were sent, you stop asking for seats at tables you were born to flip. When you know you were sent, you stop explaining your discernment to people who've settled for deception. When you know you were sent, you stop seeking closure from people who were never meant to understand the call. Let's sit in that truth for a moment. You were sent to disrupt toxic bloodlines, sent to challenge religious routines that have no spirit left in them, sent to love boldly, see clearly, walk differently, and yes, sent to endure exile. Because the path of a spiritual reformer is never embraced by the system it threatens to dismantle. That's why the exile came so swiftly. That's why it felt so personal. That's why it was layered in betrayal, confusion, and even shame. Because the enemy knows if he can make you doubt your assignment, he can delay your impact. But you're past that now, aren't you? You've walked through the fire. You've sat in the silence. You've cried the tears. You've buried the old self. You've grieved the loss of community, the loss of approval, the death of who you thought you had to be. And what remains is you, unfiltered, unapologetic, unshakable. And now, the very realms that tried to suppress your truth are watching you become the confirmation that they were wrong all along. Because your presence hasn't just survived the exile, it has outgrown it. And not only are you walking in divine clarity, you are now a mirror for others. Those who rejected you are secretly revisiting your words. Those who cast you out are now caught in spiritual tension, knowing something shifted the moment you left, because you weren't just a part of the system. You were the only one called to change it. And yes, it cost you everything, but it activated everyone. Your shift didn't just free you, it exposed them. Your decision to walk in truth, even when it meant walking alone, was the most powerful spiritual move you could have made. Because chosen ones are always sent before they are celebrated. You are sent into brokenness to model wholeness, sent into silence to restore voice, sent into confusion to anchor clarity, sent into stagnation to provoke movement, sent into performance to embody presence. And whether they admit it or not, your obedience has become a turning point. Even those who can't articulate it feel it. The people you loved, the ones who questioned your motives, the ones who couldn't hold your calling, and they're awakening. Slowly, quietly, painfully, because the truth you carried, it's still working. Even in your absence, your frequency lingers. Even without your words, your energy preaches. Even without your presence, your impact remains. And if you ever needed confirmation that the exile wasn't in vain, this is it. You were sent, not to entertain, not to fit in, but to shift atmospheres, awaken sleepers, and ignite fires. Your very being is a prophetic assignment. And every rejection, every exile, every door that shut in your face was just proof that your presence couldn't be contained. So stop looking back. Stop doubting the call. Stop measuring your growth against their comfort zones. You were sent to be different, sent to speak what others swallow, sent to carry what others drop, sent to become what others only theorize about. And you're doing it. Whether they clap or not, whether they see it yet or not, you are walking in purpose. And purpose doesn't need applause, it just needs obedience. Chosen one. The exile didn't destroy your destiny, it confirmed it, because you were sent to shake things. And now, the shaking has begun. Chosen one. Now we arrive at the part they never expected, the part where your flame, once pushed aside and buried in silence, starts burning through the very walls that were meant to contain it. You see, when they exiled you, they believed that was the end of your story. They thought they had put out the fire. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't comprehend, was that your flame was not man-made. It wasn't fueled by popularity, approval, or applause. It was divine. It was encoded into your spirit before you ever took your first breath. They thought the fire was extinguished, but instead, it spread. It moved underground. It seeped into dry places. It caught the hearts of silent observers. It reawakened those who had almost given up. And now your light is no longer just a presence. It's a legacy. That legacy, chosen one, is not built with bricks and titles. It's built in spirits that were set free by your decision to walk away, to evolve, to awaken. You didn't start a rebellion, you initiated a revival. And even if they won't say it out loud, the ripple effect is undeniable. Marriages are healing. Old beliefs are breaking. Young souls are asking new questions. The stagnant are starting to move. All because one chosen one had the courage to say, "This isn't truth anymore." Your exile became a sermon. Your absence became a mirror. And your growth became permission. Permission for others to rise, to question, to leave behind what no longer served them. You weren't meant to lead a congregation. You were meant to spark a movement, and that movement didn't need a stage. It needed you. You, in your rawness. You, in your moments of doubt. You, when you chose healing over hiding. You, when you refused to retaliate. You, when you walked away with dignity instead of destruction. You, when you let your spirit speak louder than your wounds. They're watching, and whether they ever admit it or not, your light is the reason they're warming up again. They didn't understand your obedience at first, but now it's shaping the atmosphere. Quietly, powerfully, permanently. And here's the truth most they don't want to face. They needed your fire more than they needed your presence. Because your fire lives on. It lives in the people who now dare to think differently. In the souls who are questioning the rules. In the leaders who are starting to break the mold. In the young ones who are dreaming new dreams. You didn't just disrupt a system, you planted a seed. And that seed, it's growing. You thought you lost everything. But what you actually did was birth something eternal, something that will continue to rise in the people who watched you walk away with courage, something that will whisper in the hearts of those who once mocked your transformation and now quietly crave their own, something that will echo in the lives of those who couldn't follow you but still carry your influence. This is the beauty of the chosen one's walk. You don't need to be in the room to shift it. Your energy transcends space. Your vibration reorders frequencies. Your obedience rearranges timelines. You are not just a person. You are a pathway. You are the blueprint for what courage looks like when it's wrapped in divine assignment. And that blueprint, it's now burned into the memory of every person who ever encountered you. They may forget your words. They may forget your name. But they will never forget how they felt when your presence entered their atmosphere. Because presence doesn't lie, and frequency never fades. So now the question is, not will they remember you? The question is, what will they do with what your flame awakened in them? Some will ignore it. Some will run from it. Some will even resent it. But others will rise. They'll answer the call you once answered. They'll walk the path you once walked. They'll carry the torch you once lit. And they'll continue the movement your exile started. Because what was meant to silence you has now amplified you. You're not just surviving. You're multiplying. You're not just free. You're fruitful. And this is your confirmation. You are not the exile. You are the evidence. You are not the rejected. You are the reignited. You are not what they said you were. You are what heaven always knew you would become. A catalyst, a vessel, a forerunner, a holy fire. And your legacy? It's eternal. Let your spirit slow now. Chosen one. Let the fire simmer to a holy warmth. Let the truth we've spoken cradle the aching places in you. You've carried so much. You've endured what others couldn't see. You've loved deeply, lost painfully, and still chose alignment over approval. Heaven saw it all. God was never blind to your tears, never deaf to your silence. Every exile you walked through was counted. Every rejection you faced was repurposed. Every time you questioned your worth, your calling, your very essence, he whispered, I'm still with you. This message found you now, not by chance, but by timing. Because the season you're entering requires remembrance. Remember who you are. Remember who you are not. Remember that being chosen doesn't mean being popular. It means being positioned. You are a carrier of something sacred. You are a guardian of divine truth. You are a reminder to the world that Spirit still speaks through the unlikely, still moves through the misfits, still reigns through the rejected. And no matter how far you've walked, no matter who walked away from you, your light remains. It is steady. It is seen. It is enough. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because this isn't just a word. It's confirmation. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are still on assignment. And no exile can cancel what God ordained. God bless you.